The blood-red sun dipped low over the dusty horizon as Catherine Walsh stood at the Sweetwater Springs train station, clutching her ticket to San Francisco like it was her only lifeline in a drowning world. A year in this God-forsaken Wyoming Territory town had been more than enough. The harsh winters, the isolation, and the heartbreak she'd left Boston to escape had only followed her west like a persistent shadow. Last call for the eastbound train to Cheyenne. The station master bellowed, his voice carrying across the platform. Catherine straightened her spine, adjusting the small hat pinned to her auburn hair. Her gray traveling dress, though wrinkled from the long journey from town, was the finest she owned. The trunks at her feet contained everything she'd accumulated during her disappointing Western adventure. She was 22 years old, a schoolteacher with a broken heart, and she was leaving Wyoming Territory without looking back. Miss Walsh. The voice cut through the evening air, making Catherine freeze. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. Owen Miller, the most infuriating cowboy in all of Wyoming Territory. The man whose blue eyes seemed to follow her everywhere in Sweetwater Springs, whose crooked smile had begun to haunt her dreams despite her best efforts. Miss Walsh, please. His boots pounded the wooden platform as he approached, but Catherine kept her eyes fixed on the approaching train, its black smoke billowing against the darkening sky. She wouldn't look at him. She couldn't. If she did, her resolve might crumble like the dry Wyoming earth beneath her boots. "You're really leaving," Owen said, his voice closer now, slightly out of breath. Without saying goodbye, Catherine finally turned and immediately wished she hadn't. Owen Miller stood before her, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the sunset, his dark blonde hair tousled by the wind. At 28, he was the most respected rancher in the county, a man who had built the Circle M Ranch from nothing but determination and grit. His faded blue shirt was partially unbuttoned at the collar, revealing sun-bronzed skin, and his weathered cowboy hat was clutched in his hands. "I said my goodbyes to those who needed them," Catherine replied coolly, though her heart hammered in her chest. "I don't believe we have any unfinished business, Mr. Miller." Owen's jaw tightened. "Don't we? You've been teaching at our school for a year, Catherine." "You've become part of this town, part of what?" she interrupted, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I came west for a teaching position, Mr. Miller. That position is now concluded with the school term. I have opportunities waiting in San Francisco." "San Francisco?" His eyebrows rose. "Yesterday you were headed back to Boston." Catherine looked away, annoyed that he'd caught her in the lie. "My plans are my own business." The train whistled loudly as it approached the station, wheels screeching against the tracks. Around them, porters rushed to collect luggage, and the few other passengers said their final goodbyes to loved ones. "1 week," Owen said suddenly. "Give Sweetwater Springs 1 more week." Catherine shook her head. "My ticket is purchased. My arrangements are made." "I'll buy you another ticket," he insisted, stepping closer. 1 week, Catherine. Then if you still want to leave, I'll drive you to the station myself." "Why?" she demanded, finally meeting his gaze directly. "Why does it matter to you whether I stay or go?" The intensity in his blue eyes nearly stole her breath. "Because you matter to me. Because I think you're running from something or someone, and I don't believe it's Wyoming Territory you're trying to escape." Catherine flinched as if he'd struck her. How could he know about Thomas? About the humiliation she'd fled in Boston? No one in Sweetwater Springs knew her history, the broken engagement, the scandal that had driven her west. "You know nothing about me," she whispered. "I know you're the finest teacher this town has ever had," Owen replied, his voice gentle. "I know you love those children, even tough ones like little Sarah Jenkins who can't sit still for more than 2 minutes. I know you stay late every evening to prepare your lessons, and you give extra help to anyone who needs it." The train pulled into the station with a great hiss of steam, the brakes squealing. 1 week, Owen repeated, his eyes never leaving hers. "The ranch needs help with the spring roundup. The cook just quit, and I have a dozen hungry cowboys with no one to feed them." "You once mentioned you knew your way around a kitchen." Catherine's eyebrows shot up. "You want me to cook for your ranch hands? I'll pay you double what you made teaching, and you'll have your own cabin, the old foreman's place, complete privacy." "All aboard," the conductor called. Catherine glanced at the train, then back at Owen's earnest face. 1 week at the Circle M Ranch, surrounded by the vast Wyoming sky, the rolling prairie, the snow-capped mountains in the distance. And Owen Miller, the man who made her pulse quicken despite her best efforts to remain indifferent. "The children need to know you're not abandoning them," Owen added softly, delivering the final blow to her resolve. "At least say a proper goodbye." Catherine closed her eyes briefly. The train whistle blew again, more insistent this time. 1 week, she finally said, opening her eyes. "And then I'm leaving, Mr. Miller, and nothing you say or do will stop me." The relief on Owen's face was immediate and dazzling. 1 week is all I ask. He reached for her trunks. "I have the wagon just outside the station." As the train pulled away without her, Catherine wondered if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Or perhaps, though, she hardly dared think it her first right decision in a very long time. The ride to the Circle M Ranch was silent and uncomfortable. Catherine sat stiffly beside Owen on the wagon seat, acutely aware of his presence, the broadness of his shoulders, the strength in his hands as he handled the reins, the clean scent of soap that mingled with leather, and the earthy smell that seemed uniquely his. "You're awfully quiet," Owen observed as they left the small town behind and ventured into the open country. The sun had fully set, and a blanket of stars spread across the darkening sky, more stars than Catherine had ever seen in Boston. "I'm wondering why I agreed to this madness," she replied honestly. "I don't know the first thing about cooking for a dozen ranch hands." Owen chuckled, the sound rich and warm in the cooling night air. "Can you make biscuits?" "Yes, beans, of course." "Then you're already better than our last cook. Old Pete couldn't tell salt from sugar, and his biscuits could break a man's tooth." Despite herself, Catherine smiled. "That's hardly a ringing endorsement of my potential success." "The boys aren't picky," Owen assured her. "They work from sunup to sundown. They'll eat anything that doesn't eat them first." The wagon rolled over the uneven ground, the wooden wheels creaking. In the distance, Catherine could make out the outline of buildings against the night sky, the Circle M Ranch, one of the largest cattle operations in the territory. "Tell me something," she said after a moment. "Why did you really come after me? The truth, Mr. Miller." Owen was quiet for so long that Catherine thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and serious. "This territory needs people like you, Miss Walsh. People with education, with refinement, people who care about building something that lasts." He glanced at her. "Wyoming will be a state someday, and when that happens, we'll need more than just cowboys and cattle. We'll need schools and libraries and decent folk who want to create a future here. And you think I'm one of those people? I know you are." He guided the horses around a bend in the road. "I've watched you this past year. You could have treated this position as temporary, done the minimum required. Instead, you threw yourself into it. You organized that Christmas pageant. You started the lending library with your own books. You convinced the town council to repair the schoolhouse roof." Catherine felt her cheeks warm at his praise. "I was simply doing my job." "No," Owen said firmly. "You were building something, and then suddenly you were running away just when you'd started to make a difference." He paused. "I guess I wanted to know why." The truth hovered on Catherine's lips about Thomas Caldwell, the wealthy Boston banker's son who had courted her, proposed to her, then humiliated her by marrying her cousin instead. About the whispers that had followed her, the pitying glances, the cruel gossip. About how she'd fled west not to build something new but to escape the ruins of her old life. But she couldn't bring herself to share that vulnerability, not yet. Not with Owen Miller, who seemed to see too much already. "Sometimes a fresh start is necessary," she said instead, looking out at the endless Wyoming prairie silvered by moonlight. "But I'll give you your week, Mr. Miller. I owe the children a proper goodbye at least." They crested a small rise, and suddenly the ranch sprawled before them, a large main house, a bunkhouse, barns, and corrals, all nestled in a protected valley with a creek running through it. Lamplight glowed in several windows, and the silhouettes of horses moved in the nearest corral. "Welcome to the Circle M," Owen said, a note of pride in his voice. "It's not much, but it's home." Catherine took in the sight, so different from the crowded streets of Boston or even the modest town of Sweetwater Springs. Here was space, endless space, and a sense of possibility that she hadn't felt in a long time. "It's beautiful," she admitted softly. Owen's smile in the moonlight did strange things to her heart. "Wait until you see it in the daylight." He guided the wagon to a small cabin set apart from the main house and the bunkhouse. "This is the old foreman's cabin. My foreman, Jackson, moved into the bunkhouse last year to keep an eye on the younger hands. It's been empty since then." He jumped down from the wagon and came around to help Catherine descend. His hands at her waist were strong and sure, and for a brief, dizzying moment, he held her suspended above the ground, their eyes locked. Then he set her gently on her feet and stepped back, clearing his throat. "I'll bring your trunks in," he said, his voice slightly rough. "There's a pump out back for water, and I had one of the boys light a fire in the stove earlier. Should be warm enough inside." The cabin was small but clean, with a main room that served as both kitchen and living area, and a separate bedroom through a doorway hung with a faded curtain. A cast iron stove dominated one wall, glowing with banked coals. There was a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the small window, and shelves stacked with basic supplies. "It's not what you're used to in Boston, I'm sure," Owen said as he carried in her trunks, setting them carefully by the bedroom doorway. "It's perfectly adequate," Catherine replied, removing her gloves and hat. "Thank you." Owen lingered by the door, seeming reluctant to leave. "Breakfast is at 5. The hands eat in the cookhouse behind the main house. You'll find everything you need there: flour, bacon, coffee, beans." He hesitated. "If you need anything during the night, I'm in the main house, just the other side of that big oak tree." Catherine nodded, suddenly exhausted by the events of the day: the decision to leave, the last-minute change of plans, the emotional turmoil of Owen's unexpected intervention. "Good night, Mr. Miller." "Owen," he corrected gently. "If you're going to be cooking my meals for a week, I think we can dispense with formalities." A small smile tugged at her lips. "Good night, Owen." "Good night, Catherine." He placed his hat back on his head and stepped outside, closing the door quietly behind him. Alone in the cabin, Catherine sank into the rocking chair, wondering what madness had possessed her to agree to his proposition. 1 week. 7 days at the Circle M Ranch, cooking for cowboys and living in this rustic cabin. And then she would leave, she reminded herself firmly. She would board that train and leave Wyoming Territory and Owen Miller behind for good. This time, there would be no last-minute change of plans, no yielding to persuasive blue eyes and earnest words. She was still leaving. This was merely a brief delay in her journey, nothing more. But as she prepared for bed in the small, sparse bedroom, Catherine couldn't help but wonder what the next 7 days might bring, and why the thought of them filled her with both trepidation and an unexpected flicker of hope. Catherine woke before dawn, startled by the unfamiliar surroundings until memory returned. The Circle M Ranch, Owen Miller, her promise to stay 1 week. She dressed quickly in her simplest dress, a practical brown cotton that wouldn't show stains, and pinned her hair in a simple knot at the nape of her neck. There was no time for vanity if she was to prepare breakfast for a dozen hungry cowboys by 5 o'clock. The cookhouse was a separate building behind the main house, larger than her cabin and dominated by a massive iron stove, a long preparation table, and 2 dining tables with benches. The pantry was well stocked, and she quickly found coffee, flour, bacon, and eggs. By the time the first cowboys began filing in, rubbing sleep from their eyes, she had coffee brewing, biscuits in the oven, and bacon sizzling in a cast iron skillet. "Well, I'll be damned," said a grizzled older cowboy, removing his hat as he entered. Boss wasn't kidding. "We got ourselves a lady cook." "Language, mister." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "Hank, madam, just Hank." He had the grace to look abashed. "Beg pardon for my French." The other cowboys filed in, each introducing themselves with varying degrees of awkwardness. They were a diverse lot, young and old, tall and short, some weathered by years on the range, others still smooth-faced and barely out of boyhood. But they all shared the same hungry look as they eyed the food she was preparing. "Miss Walsh is our schoolteacher from town," Owen explained as he entered the cookhouse. She's kindly agreed to help us out for a week until we can find a permanent cook. Catherine felt his eyes on her as she worked, but she kept her attention on the food, serving up plates of bacon, eggs, and biscuits with practiced efficiency. The men fell on the food like wolves, but not before Hank insisted they all remove their hats and Owen said a brief blessing. "This is mighty fine cooking, Miss Walsh," one of the younger cowboys, Jimmy. She thought his name was said around a mouthful of biscuit. "Thank you," she replied, refilling coffee cups, "but please don't speak with your mouth full." A ripple of good-natured laughter went around the table. "She's schooling us already, boss," Hank chuckled. "Might make proper gentlemen of us yet." Owen's eyes met Catherine's across the room, warm with approval. "That would take more than a week, I'm afraid." After breakfast, the men filed out to begin their day's work. Catherine started cleaning up, but Owen lingered behind. "You're a natural," he said, rolling up his sleeves to help with the dishes. "I haven't seen them eat that quietly since." "Well, ever," Catherine shrugged, but she couldn't help feeling pleased. They were simply hungry. "They were impressed," Owen corrected. "As am I." He picked up a towel to dry the dishes she washed. "Today's the first day of our spring roundup. We'll be gathering cattle from the far pastures, so the men will be especially hungry at dinner. What time should I expect you all?" "Around 7. "And don't worry about lunch, the boys take jerky and biscuits with them." He hesitated. "I thought maybe after you finish cleaning up here, you might want to ride out with me to check on some of the closer pastures, see a bit of the ranch." Catherine looked up in surprise. "I have dinner to prepare." "There's plenty of time," Owen insisted. "And I promise to have you back well before you need to start cooking. What do you say? I have a gentle mare that would suit you perfectly." The idea of spending hours alone with Owen Miller should have made Catherine refuse immediately. It was precisely the kind of situation she should avoid if she wanted to maintain her emotional distance. And yet, "I haven't ridden in some time," she admitted. "The mare's name is Daisy. She's as sweet as they come." Owen's eyes were hopeful. "It's a beautiful spring day. Seems a shame to spend it all indoors." Against her better judgment, Catherine found herself nodding. "Very well, Mr. Miller Owen, I'll accompany you on your rounds." An hour later, she was perched atop a dappled gray mare, following Owen and his chestnut gelding along a trail that wound through rolling grassland. She wore her split, riding skirt, the one concession to Western practicality she'd made during her year in Wyoming, and a borrowed hat to shield her face from the sun. The day was indeed beautiful, the sky an impossible blue stretching from horizon to horizon, the grasslands a patchwork of green and gold, dotted with early spring wildflowers. In the distance, snow still capped the highest mountains, gleaming white against the azure sky. "It's breathtaking," Catherine admitted as they paused atop a ridge overlooking a vast valley where black cattle grazed peacefully. "I've never seen such open space." Owen nodded, his expression thoughtful as he surveyed his domain. "That's what drew me here, the freedom of it, the possibility." He glanced at her. "I came west with nothing but $20 in my pocket and a dream of building something that would last." "How did you acquire all this?" Catherine gestured at the sprawling ranch lands. "Hard work, luck, stubbornness." Owen smiled slightly. "I started as a ranch hand, saved every penny, bought my first few head of cattle, then worked contracts with the army to supply beef. Gradually bought more land, more cattle." His expression grew serious. "Not everyone was happy about it. There's been trouble from time to time." "What kind of trouble?" Owen shrugged, but Catherine sensed his casual response masked deeper concerns. "The usual rustlers, land disputes. Some of the bigger ranchers don't like how quickly the Circle M has grown." They rode on, Owen pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the ranch's history. Catherine found herself relaxing in his company, laughing at his tales of cattle drives gone wrong and the antics of his cowboys. "And what about you?" Owen asked as they let their horses drink from a clear stream. "What brought a Boston society lady to Wyoming Territory?" Catherine tensed. "I'm hardly society." "You have the bearing of it," Owen observed. "The education, the refined manner." She looked away, watching the water ripple over stones. "My father was a professor at Harvard. After he died, I needed to support myself. Teaching seemed the natural choice." "But why come all the way to Wyoming?" The question hung in the air between them. Catherine considered evading it again, but something about the vast openness surrounding them made secrets seem futile. "I was engaged," she said finally, "to a banker's son, Thomas Caldwell. It was expected, suitable, but 2 weeks before the wedding, I found him with my cousin Alina." She swallowed hard. They were already married, had been secretly for months while he maintained our engagement as a cover for his family's sake. Owen's expression darkened. The bastard. The scandal was considerable. Catherine forced herself to continue, the words coming easier now that she'd started. Alina had always been jealous of me, though I never understood why. She was beautiful, charming, but she wanted what I had or what she thought I had. She took Thomas and with him my reputation. The whispers, the pitying glances, I couldn't bear it. So when I saw the advertisement for a teaching position in Wyoming Territory, I applied immediately. "You ran away," Owen said softly. Catherine looked at him sharply. "I made a strategic retreat. There's a difference." "And now you're retreating again. To San Francisco?" "I'm moving forward," she corrected. "My year here was always meant to be temporary." Owen studied her face for a long moment. "What if it doesn't have to be?" Before Catherine could respond, a gunshot echoed in the distance, followed by a second. Owen's head snapped up, his relaxed demeanor instantly replaced by alertness. "That's coming from the north pasture," he said, swinging back onto his horse. "Something's wrong, stay close to me." He urged his gelding into a gallop, and Catherine followed, her heart pounding as they raced across the open grassland. They crested a hill to find two of Owen's cowboys engaged in a standoff with three rough-looking men. One of the cowboys was on the ground, clutching his leg. Miller. One of the strangers called, a tall man with a pockmarked face. "Tell your boys to back down, we're just taking what's owed us." Owen drew his horse to a halt, gesturing for Catherine to stay behind him. "Nothing's owed to you, Daniels, those are my cattle and you know it." The man Daniels sneered. "Barton don't see it that way, says you've been grazing on his land." "That boundary dispute was settled by the territorial court last fall," Owen replied, his voice dangerously calm. "You're rustling, plain and simple." Catherine watched in horror as Daniel's hand drifted toward his gun. "Owen," she whispered in warning, but before anyone could draw, the sound of galloping hooves announced the arrival of more cowboys from the Circle M. 6 riders appeared over the ridge, led by Hank, all with rifles at the ready. Daniels assessed the changed odds and slowly raised his hands. "Another day, Miller. Barton ain't finished with you." "Get off my land," Owen said coldly, "and tell Barton if he has a problem with me, he can come himself instead of sending his dogs." The 3 men backed away slowly, mounted their horses, and rode off. Only when they were out of sight did Owen dismount and hurry to his injured cowboy. "How bad is it, Pete?" the young man grimaced. "Just a graze, boss." "Caught me by surprise when they started driving off that small herd by the creek. Tim and I tried to stop them." Owen helped Pete to his feet. "You did right. Hank, get Pete back to the ranch. Have Jackson look at that wound. The rest of you, check the herd, make sure we didn't lose any." As the men dispersed to their tasks, Owen returned to Catherine, his expression grim. "I'm sorry you had to witness that." Catherine was still processing what she'd seen. "Does this happen often, more often lately?" Owen ran a hand through his hair, dislodging his hat. "Richard Barton owns the biggest spread in the territory. He's not used to competition, and he doesn't like that I've built the Circle M into a rival operation. He sends men to steal your cattle and intimidate my hands, threaten merchants in town who do business with me." Owen's jaw tightened. "He's used to getting his way." Catherine thought about the peaceful day they'd been enjoying, suddenly shattered by violence. "Is it safe for you, for your men?" Something softened in Owen's eyes at her concern. "We can handle Barton and his thugs. But this is why I need to get you back to the ranch. I don't want you caught in the middle of this." They rode back in tense silence, the earlier camaraderie replaced by a weight of unspoken worries. Catherine found herself watching Owen's profile, seeing him in a new light, not just the charming, persistent rancher who'd convinced her to stay, but a man facing real dangers, fighting to protect what he'd built. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was high overhead. Owen helped Catherine dismount, his hands lingering at her waist slightly longer than necessary. "I really am sorry about today," he said quietly. It's not what I had planned for your tour of the Circle M. Catherine surprised herself by placing her hand on his arm. It's not your fault. And I'm glad I was with you so I could understand what you're facing. Owen covered her hand with his own, his skin warm and calloused. You still planning to leave at the end of the week? The question caught her off guard. With everything that had happened, Catherine hadn't thought about her departure. Yes, of course, he nodded, his expression unreadable. I'd better check on Pete. Thank you for riding with me today, Catherine. As she watched him walk toward the bunkhouse, Catherine felt a confusing swirl of emotions. Concern for Owen and his men, anger at the men who threatened them, and something else, something that felt dangerously like attachment. She turned toward the cookhouse, reminding herself firmly that she had dinner to prepare and only 6 more days until she could board that train to San Francisco. 6 days to maintain her emotional distance. 6 days to remember that Wyoming Territory and Owen Miller were not part of her future. But as she began preparations for the evening meal, Catherine couldn't shake the image of Owen facing down those rustlers, his quiet courage, his determination to protect what was his. Or the way her heart had raced when he'd helped her from her horse, his blue eyes searching hers for. What? 6 days, she murmured to herself as she kneaded dough for bread. Just 6 more days. The days fell into a rhythm that Catherine found both comforting and dangerous. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, spent her mornings cleaning and preparing for the evening meal, and her afternoons exploring the ranch or helping with small tasks. The cowboys quickly warmed to her, treating her with a mixture of respect and protective camaraderie that reminded her of having a dozen older brothers. Owen was often absent during the days, riding out with his men for the spring roundup, but he made a point of speaking with her each morning and evening, checking that she had everything she needed, sharing news of the ranch's operations. Their conversations grew longer, more personal, the silences between them more comfortable. On her 3rd day at the Circle M, Catherine was gathering eggs from the henhouse when she heard the sound of children's laughter. She emerged to find a wagon pulling up to the main house, driven by a woman about her own age with a small boy and girl in the back. "Miss Walsh," the children cried in unison, scrambling down from the wagon as soon as it stopped. Catherine recognized them immediately, Sarah and Michael Jenkins, 2 of her pupils from the Sweetwater Springs school. "What a lovely surprise," she said, setting down her basket to receive their enthusiastic hugs. "Mama said we could come visit you," Sarah explained, her blonde pigtails bouncing as she hopped from one foot to the other. "Is it true you're leaving forever and ever?" Catherine glanced up at Mrs. Jenkins, who was approaching with an apologetic smile. "I hope we're not intruding," the woman said, "but the children were so upset when they heard you might be leaving town. They insisted on saying goodbye properly." "Of course you're not intruding," Catherine assured her, though she felt a pang of guilt at the children's distress. "I was planning to visit the school before I left." "Are you really going away, Miss Walsh?" Michael asked, his 7-year-old face solemn. "Who's going to teach us about dinosaur bones and Egyptian pyramids?" Catherine knelt to his level. "I'm sure the school board will find another fine teacher." "But they won't be you," Sarah protested. "You're the best teacher ever. You don't make us sit still all day and you read the most exciting stories." Mrs. Jenkins sighed. "I told Owen this might happen. The children have grown so attached to you." Catherine looked up sharply. "Owen, Mr. Miller asked you to bring the children here." "Not in so many words," Mrs. Jenkins replied with a knowing smile. "But he mentioned you were staying at the ranch for a week and that perhaps the children would like to say goodbye." She glanced toward the main house where Owen had emerged onto the porch. "He's quite resourceful when he sets his mind to something, or someone." Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Mrs. Jenkins, I assure you no need for assurances, dear," the older woman said kindly. "Half the women in Sweetwater Springs have set their caps for Owen Miller over the years. He's never shown particular interest in any of them until you arrived in town." Before Catherine could formulate a response, the children tugged her toward the chicken coop, eager to show them the hens. She allowed herself to be led away, grateful for the distraction, though she was acutely aware of Owen watching from the porch, a small smile playing on his lips. Later, after Mrs. Jenkins and the children had departed with promises to visit again before Catherine left. She confronted Owen as he helped her carry water to the cookhouse. "You arranged that visit," she accused, though there was no real anger in her voice. Owen didn't deny it. "I thought you might be missing your students." "That was thoughtful," Catherine admitted, though also rather manipulative, guilty as charged. He set down the water buckets outside the cookhouse door. "Did it work? Are you reconsidering your departure?" Catherine shook her head, though with less conviction than she might have a few days earlier. "My plans haven't changed, Owen." He studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Well, I haven't given up hope yet. I still have 4 days to change your mind." His persistence should have annoyed her. Instead, Catherine found herself fighting a smile. "You're very sure of yourself, Mr. Miller." "Not at all," he replied with surprising candor. "I'm just a man who knows what he wants and isn't afraid to work for it." His blue eyes held hers. "And I want you to stay, Catherine Walsh." The directness of his statement left her momentarily speechless. Before she could recover, one of the cowboys called for Owen from the corral, breaking the moment. "Duty calls," Owen said with a regretful smile, "but think about what I said." As he walked away, Catherine pressed a hand to her racing heart. This was exactly what she'd feared, that Owen Miller would work his way past her defenses, make her consider possibilities she'd sworn to avoid after Thomas's betrayal. She had come to Wyoming to escape heartbreak, not to risk experiencing it again. Yet here she was, 4 days into her week at the Circle M, already dreading the moment she would have to leave. That evening, after the cowboys had finished their dinner and retired to the bunkhouse, Owen invited Catherine to join him on the porch of the main house. The spring night was mild, the sky ablaze with stars, and a nearly full moon cast silver light across the ranch yard. "It's beautiful here," Catherine said softly as they sat side by side in wooden rocking chairs. "So different from Boston, different good or different bad?" Owen asked. She considered the question seriously. "Different, freeing." In Boston, everything feels confined: the streets, the buildings, the expectations. Here, there's so much space, room to breathe, room to become whoever you want to be. Owen nodded, pleased by her answer. "That's why I came west. In Philadelphia, I was just another poor boy with no prospects. My father was a factory worker, my mother a seamstress. They died of influenza when I was 16, one right after the other." "I'm sorry," Catherine said, genuinely moved by the pain that still lingered in his voice. "It was a long time ago," Owen replied. "After they died, I worked in the same factory as my father for 2 years, hating every minute of it. Then one day, I read a newspaper article about the Wyoming Territory, about the open land, the opportunities. So I took what little savings I had and headed west." "And never looked back," Catherine murmured. "Not once." Owen's profile was strong in the moonlight. "When I first saw this valley, I knew this was where I belonged. It took me 7 years of working for other ranchers, saving every penny, but I finally bought my first parcel of land, just 100 acres where the main house now stands. And built it into all this." Catherine gestured at the sprawling ranch around them. "It's impressive, Owen." He turned to look at her directly. "I'm not finished building yet, Catherine. The Circle M has room to grow. I've been thinking about raising horses, not just cattle, maybe planting some crops in the eastern fields." He paused. "And Sweetwater Springs needs a proper school building, not just that one-room cabin. The town's growing. We'll need more than one teacher eventually." Catherine understood what he was really saying. "Owen, I know," he said quickly. "You have plans. San Francisco." "I'm not trying to pressure you. I just want you to know that there's a place for you here, a future if you want it." A coyote howled in the distance, the sound echoing across the valley. Catherine shivered slightly, and Owen immediately removed his jacket, draping it around her shoulders. The warmth of the garment carrying his scent enveloped her. "Thank you," she said, pulling it closer. "For the jacket and for seeing possibilities for me that I haven't considered." Owen's smile was gentle in the moonlight. "Sometimes it takes an outsider's perspective to see what's right in front of us." They sat in companionable silence for a while, rocking gently, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the soft nickering of horses in the corral, the distant lowing of cattle, the rustle of wind through the cottonwood trees. "Tell me more about Boston," Owen said eventually. not the bad parts. The good memories. Catherine closed her eyes, thinking back to the life she'd left behind. I loved the autumn there, the way the leaves turned on the common, all reds and golds, the bookshops along Washington Street. My father would take me every Saturday and I could choose one book as a treat. She smiled at the memory. There were concerts at the music hall and lectures at the Athenaeum. My father's colleagues would come for dinner and they'd debate philosophy and literature late into the night. You miss that intellectual life, Owen observed. Sometimes, Catherine admitted. But Sweetwater Springs has its own kind of wisdom. Mrs. Jenkins knows more about medicinal plants than any Boston doctor. And Mr. Peterson at the general store can recite Shakespeare from memory. He surprised me with entire passages from Hamlet one day when I was buying supplies for the school. Owen chuckled. Peterson was an actor in his youth before he came west. He performed for Queen Victoria once, or so he claims. I believe it, Catherine said. He has a theatrical flair even when he's just selling calico. They talked well into the night, sharing stories and memories, finding unexpected commonalities despite their different backgrounds. When Catherine finally yawned, unable to stifle her exhaustion, Owen walked her back to her cabin. At her door, he hesitated. Tomorrow's Sunday, no roundup work. I thought maybe we could ride to the high meadow. There's a view there that's worth the journey. Catherine knew she should refuse. Each moment spent in Owen's company made the prospect of leaving more difficult, but she found herself nodding. I'd like that. Owen's smile was like sunrise. Get some rest. I'll come for you after breakfast. He reached out, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers brushing her cheek with the lightest of touches. Good night, Catherine. Good night, Owen, she whispered, her skin tingling where he'd touched her. Inside her cabin, Catherine removed Owen's jacket, holding it for a moment before carefully draping it over a chair. 4 more days, she reminded herself. Just 4 more days, and she would be on that train to San Francisco, leaving the Circle M and Owen Miller behind. But as she prepared for bed, Catherine couldn't ignore the growing doubt in her heart. Was she running toward something in San Francisco or simply running away again? And was leaving really what she wanted anymore? Sunday dawned clear and warm, a perfect spring day in the Wyoming Territory. After serving breakfast to the handful of cowboys who remained at the ranch while the others attended church in town, Catherine changed into her riding skirt and a fresh blouse, pinning her hair up neatly beneath a borrowed hat. Owen was waiting for her outside the cookhouse, holding the reins of both his gelding and Daisy, the gentle mare Catherine had ridden before. He'd packed a picnic lunch in saddlebags and brought along a canteen of fresh water, ready for an adventure. He asked, his smile warming her more than the spring sunshine. As ready as I'll ever be, Catherine replied, allowing him to help her mount. They rode north from the ranch, following game trails that wound through rolling hills covered in spring wildflowers, purple lupine, bright yellow balsam root, and delicate white phlox, creating a colorful carpet across the landscape. As they climbed higher, the view expanded, revealing the vastness of the territory stretching in all directions. There, Owen pointed toward a distant meadow high on a ridge. That's where we're headed. The ride took nearly 2 hours, but Catherine found she didn't mind. Owen was a knowledgeable guide, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the land's history, both the recent settlement by ranchers and the much longer presence of the Shoshone and Arapaho peoples, who had lived there for generations. My foreman, Jackson, is half Shoshone, Owen explained as they rode. He taught me to respect the land, to understand its rhythms, said his people had survived here for centuries by listening to what the earth and sky had to teach them. Wise advice, Catherine commented, admiring the way Owen spoke with genuine respect rather than the condescension she'd often heard from Easterners discussing native peoples. They reached the high meadow just before noon. It was a beautiful spot, a natural clearing ringed by aspen trees, with a small spring bubbling up from among rocks at one end. But it was the view that took Catherine's breath away. Mountains in the distance, the winding ribbon of a river below, and the vast expanse of the territory spread out like a living map. Oh, Owen, she breathed. It's magnificent. He helped her dismount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. Worth the ride. Worth every minute, she assured him, unable to tear her eyes from the panorama before them. They spread a blanket near the spring and unpacked the lunch fresh bread Catherine had baked that morning, cold chicken, apples, and a jar of preserves. As they ate, Owen pointed out features of the landscape his ranch in the distance, the town of Sweetwater Springs just visible as a cluster of buildings, the mountain pass that led to the next territory. I come up here sometimes when I need to think, Owen admitted. To remind myself of what I'm working for, what I'm building. Catherine studied his profile, strong and thoughtful against the backdrop of sky and mountains. And what are you building, Owen Miller? Beyond a successful ranch, he considered her question carefully. A future, a legacy. Something that will outlast me. He turned to meet her gaze. My parents died with nothing to show for their lives of hard work. No property, no savings, not even decent headstones until I came back years later and paid for them. Is that why you're so driven? To prove their lives had meaning. Owen looked surprised at her insight. I've never thought of it that way, but yes, maybe that's part of it. They deserved better than they got. He plucked a stem of grass, twirling it between his fingers. But it's more than that now. This land, it gets into your blood. I want to see it thrive, see the community grow. Sweetwater Springs could be something special with the right people investing in its future. People like you, Catherine said softly. And people like you, he replied, meeting her eyes directly. The territory needs educators, Catherine. People who can help shape the next generation, who understand the value of knowledge and culture alongside the practical skills of ranching and farming. Catherine looked away, out toward the vast horizon. You make it sound so important, so meaningful, isn't it? Owen moved closer, his shoulder nearly touching hers. Isn't shaping young minds the most important work there is? You're good at it, Catherine. I've seen you with those children. They adore you, and they're learning more than just reading and figures from you. They're learning curiosity, compassion, how to think for themselves. His faith in her abilities warmed Catherine more than she wanted to admit. In Boston, after the scandal with Thomas, she'd felt diminished, her confidence shattered along with her heart. But here, in this wild territory, Owen Miller saw her as someone valuable, someone who mattered. What would I do in San Francisco that would be more meaningful? He asked gently. The question struck Catherine like a physical blow. What indeed? She had no specific plans, no position waiting for her. San Francisco had simply been a destination, another place to run to. I don't know, she admitted finally. I just know I can't. I can't risk staying somewhere only to have it not work out again, to build a life and then watch it crumble. Owen was quiet for a long moment. Then, very deliberately, he reached out and took her hand in his. His skin was warm, slightly rough from years of ranch work, but his touch was gentle. Catherine, he said softly, not everyone is Thomas Caldwell, not every place is Boston. She stared at their joined hands, feeling the steady strength in his grip, the reassurance in his touch. I know that. Logically, I know that. But the heart doesn't always listen to logic, Owen finished for her. I understand, truly I do. His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. All I'm asking is that you consider the possibility that running away again might not be the answer, that maybe, just maybe, what you're looking for is right here. A meadowlark called from a nearby tree, its clear, sweet song filling the silence between them. Catherine didn't pull her hand away, finding comfort in the connection. 3 more days, Owen said eventually. 3 more days to show you what could be possible here. Catherine looked up to find his blue eyes watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Owen, whatever she might have said was interrupted by the distant sound of gunfire. Owen was on his feet instantly, his relaxed demeanor replaced by alertness. That's coming from the direction of the ranch, he said, already moving toward the horses. We need to go. Now. They packed up quickly, and Owen helped Catherine mount Daisy, his movements efficient but gentle despite his obvious concern. They rode back down the mountain at a faster pace than their ascent, Owen leading the way along the trails with single-minded focus. As they neared the ranch, they could see smoke rising from one of the outbuildings, the smaller barn, Catherine realized with horror. Cowboys were running with buckets of water, forming a line from the creek to fight the flames. Stay back, Owen instructed as they rode into the yard. He helped her quickly from her horse, then raced to join his men at the fire. Catherine ignored his directive, hurrying to help the cook, Mrs. Peterson, who had arrived that morning to prepare Sunday dinner and was now filling buckets at the pump. "What happened?" Catherine asked as she grabbed a bucket and began pumping water. "Riders came," the older woman explained, her face grim. "4 of them. Shot up the place, set fire to the barn, and rode off. Hank thinks it was Barton's men again." Catherine felt a chill despite the heat of the day. The boundary dispute Owen had mentioned, the confrontation with the rustlers, it was escalating into something dangerous. It took nearly an hour to extinguish the fire. The barn was damaged but not destroyed, though 2 horses had been injured by gunfire. As Catherine helped tend to the wounded animals, applying poultices under the direction of Jackson, the foreman, she watched Owen conferring with his men, his expression grim. "Will the horses recover?" she asked Jackson as they finished bandaging a mare's shoulder. The tall, half-Shoshone man nodded. "The wounds aren't deep, they'll heal." He glanced toward Owen. "It's the boss I'm worried about. Barton's pushing him hard." "Why, what does Barton want?" Jackson straightened, wiping his hands on a cloth. "The Circle M. Barton's been trying to buy out every small rancher in the territory. Owen's the only one who's not only refused to sell but has built his operation to rival Barton's. The old man can't stand it. That's why they attacked today, to pressure Owen to sell. That'd be my guess." Jackson's dark eyes were troubled. "Boss won't sell, though. This land is everything to him." Catherine looked across the yard to where Owen stood, his shirt smoke-stained, his face set in determined lines as he spoke with Hank and 2 other cowboys. She felt a surge of admiration for his courage, mixed with fear for his safety. Later, after the immediate crisis had passed and the hands had returned to their Sunday activities, Catherine found Owen alone by the corral, checking on the uninjured horses. "Are you all right?" she asked, coming to stand beside him. He glanced at her, a tired smile briefly softening his features. "I should be asking you that. I'm sorry our day was ruined." "I'm not concerned about our outing," Catherine said firmly. "I'm concerned about you. This situation with Barton seems to be getting worse." Owen sighed, leaning his forearms on the corral fence. "It is. He's getting bolder, more desperate." He turned to look at her directly. "I should probably arrange for you to return to town tomorrow. It's not safe here." "I'm not afraid," Catherine replied, surprising herself with the truth of the statement. "And I gave you my word 1 week. I still have 3 days. Owen studied her face, his expression a mixture of concern and something warmer, more personal. "You're a remarkable woman, Catherine Walsh." "Hardly," she demurred. "I'm simply keeping my promise. You're much more than that." Owen's voice was low, intimate. "You've brought something to the Circle M that's been missing. The men are happier, more settled. There's laughter in the cookhouse again. Even Jackson's been smiling, and that's a rare sight indeed." Catherine felt her cheeks warm at his praise. "I've only been cooking for them. Anyone could do that." "No," Owen shook his head. "It's not just the cooking, it's you, your kindness, your quiet strength. The way you've made this place feel like a home, not just a ranch." The word hung between them, home. Such a simple word, yet so loaded with meaning. Catherine had been searching for a home since leaving Boston, a place where she belonged, where she mattered. Could it be here at the Circle M? Before she could respond, Owen straightened, his expression changing as he looked past her. "We have visitors." Catherine turned to see a wagon approaching, driven by the town sheriff with the doctor beside him. Their expressions were grave. "Doc Ward," Owen greeted them as they pulled up. "Sheriff Taylor, what brings you out on a Sunday?" Sheriff Taylor, a weathered man in his 50s with a silver mustache, stepped down from the wagon. "Heard about the trouble out here, Owen. Came to see for myself." "And I came to check on those injured horses," Dr. Ward added, collecting his bag. "And any human casualties, though I hope there aren't any." "No human injuries, thankfully," Owen assured him. "Jackson's with the horses in the stable." As the doctor headed toward the stable, Sheriff Taylor removed his hat, turning it in his hands, a gesture Catherine recognized as discomfort. "Owen, we need to talk, privately." Owen frowned. "Anything you have to say can be said in front of Miss Walsh." The sheriff glanced at Catherine, then nodded reluctantly. "It's Barton. He's filed a formal complaint with the territorial authorities claiming you've been rustling his cattle. That's absurd, Owen exclaimed. He's the one sending men to steal my stock. I know that, Sheriff Taylor said placatingly, but Barton has influence with the governor. He's demanding an investigation. Owen's jaw tightened. Let them investigate. I have nothing to hide. There's more, the sheriff continued. Barton's calling in his loans all over town. Peterson at the general store, the blacksmith, even the saloon owner, they all owe Barton money, and he's demanding immediate payment. He's punishing anyone who does business with me, Owen realized, his voice hard. Trying to turn the town against me, Sheriff Taylor nodded grimly. It's working too. People are scared. Barton's men have been hanging around town making threats, subtle but clear. Catherine watched the emotions play across Owen's face: anger, concern, determination. What can we do? She asked quietly. Both men looked at her, seemingly surprised by her use of we, but Owen's expression softened slightly. Stand our ground, he replied. I won't be bullied by Barton or anyone else. That's what I figured you'd say, Sheriff Taylor sighed. Just be careful, Owen. Barton's not playing by the rules anymore. After the sheriff and doctor departed, Catherine followed Owen to the main house. He was visibly troubled, his earlier good humor replaced by a tense preoccupation. Is there anything I can do? She asked as they entered the spacious main room of the ranch house. Owen ran a hand through his hair, disheveling it further. You've done more than enough already, staying here despite all this trouble. He paced to the window, looking out toward the damaged barn. Maybe it would be better if you did return to town tomorrow, or even take that train to San Francisco. Get as far from this mess as possible. Is that what you want? Catherine asked quietly. For me to leave? He turned to face her, his expression pained. God, no, that's the last thing I want. But I can't bear the thought of you being caught in the crossfire if Barton's men return. Catherine moved closer to him, drawn by the genuine concern in his voice. Owen, I'm not helpless, and I'm not afraid. You should be, he said softly. I am, not for myself, but for my men, for the ranch. For you. Something in his tone, in the intensity of his gaze, made Catherine's heart beat faster. She took another step toward him, close enough now to see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, to notice the day's stubble shadowing his jaw. I've spent the past year running from my fears, she said. I'm tired of running, Owen, his breath caught audibly. Catherine. Whatever he might have said was lost as he closed the remaining distance between them, one hand coming up to cradle her cheek with exquisite gentleness. Catherine's eyes fluttered closed as Owen's lips found hers in a kiss that began tentatively, a question more than a demand. She answered by leaning into him, her hands coming to rest on his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. The kiss deepened, Owen's arm circling her waist to draw her closer, Catherine's fingers sliding up to tangle in his hair. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the day you arrived in Sweetwater Springs, he confessed, his voice husky. Catherine smiled, feeling a lightness, a joy she hadn't experienced in longer than she could remember. Why didn't you? You were the school teacher, he replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Proper, dignified, completely intimidating with your Boston education and refined manners, and you made it very clear you weren't interested in frontier entanglements. I wasn't, Catherine admitted. Or I thought I wasn't. After Thomas, I swore I wouldn't let myself be vulnerable again. Owen's arms tightened around her. I'm not Thomas, Catherine. I would never hurt you that way. I know, she whispered, and realized she did know it with a certainty that surprised her. In the few days she'd spent at the Circle M, she'd seen Owen's character revealed in countless ways: his kindness to his men, his gentleness with animals, his unwavering integrity even in the face of threats. They might have kissed again, but the sound of approaching footsteps on the porch made them step apart just before Jackson entered. Boss, he said, then stopped, looking between them with knowing eyes. Sorry to interrupt. The horses are settled, but I think we should post extra guards tonight, just in case Barton's men decide to return. Owen nodded, his expression shifting back to the responsible rancher, though his eyes still held warmth when they met Catherine's. Arrange a rotation. And send someone to town tomorrow to warn our friends there about Barton's threats. After Jackson departed, Owen turned back to Catherine. I should help with the preparations, and you probably need to start dinner for the men. Yes, Catherine agreed, though she was reluctant to end this moment between them. But perhaps, after dinner we could continue our conversation. Owen's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. I'd like that very much. As Catherine walked back to the cookhouse, her lips still tingling from Owen's kiss, her mind was a whirl of conflicting emotions. Joy at this unexpected connection with a man so different from Thomas, so much more genuine and honorable. Fear for what might happen with Barton's escalating threats. And confusion about her own plans. 2 more days and she was supposed to board that train. Leave Sweetwater Springs, leave the Circle M, leave Owen. But how could she go now, when everything she'd been seeking might be right here? The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity and mounting tension. Barton's men didn't return to the ranch, but reports from town grew increasingly concerning. The general store owner had been forced to pay his loan in full, nearly bankrupting him. The blacksmith had found his shop vandalized. And several families who had been friendly with Owen suddenly avoided any connection to the Circle M. Through it all, Catherine remained at Owen's side, helping where she could, cooking for the men, tending to the injured horses, even helping Jackson inventory supplies in case they needed to withstand a longer siege. And in the evenings, she and Owen would find moments alone, talking long into the night, sharing their hopes and fears, learning each other's stories, and exchanging increasingly passionate kisses that left them both breathless and wanting more. On what was supposed to be Catherine's final night at the Circle M, Owen invited her to dine with him at the main house rather than in the cookhouse with the men. He'd arranged for Mrs. Peterson to prepare a special meal, and the dining room table was set with the ranch's best china and silver, a bouquet of wildflowers at its center. "This is lovely," Catherine said as Owen held her chair, admiring the effort he'd made to create a special evening. "You deserve much more," Owen replied, taking his seat across from her. "But this is the best the Circle M can offer at the moment." They dined on roast beef, fresh vegetables from Mrs. Peterson's garden, and apple pie for dessert. Owen had even procured a bottle of wine from his limited cellar, a luxury rarely seen in the territory. As they finished their meal, Owen reached across the table to take Catherine's hand. "Tomorrow's the day," he said quietly. "The train leaves at noon." Catherine nodded, her heart heavy. Despite the joy she'd found in Owen's arms, the situation with Barton had only grown worse. Just that afternoon, news had arrived that Barton had hired additional gunmen, men with dangerous reputations from as far away as Texas and Colorado. "I've been thinking," Owen continued, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm, "about what you said, that you're tired of running from your fears." Yes, his blue eyes were serious, intent. "I'm afraid too, Catherine, afraid of losing the ranch, afraid of failing my men, afraid of losing you." Catherine's breath caught at the raw honesty in his voice. "But I've never let fear stop me before," Owen continued. "When I left Philadelphia, everyone said I was mad to head west alone. When I bought my first land, people said I'd never make it as a rancher. When I stood up to Barton, they said I was signing my own death warrant." He squeezed her hand gently. "They were wrong every time." "Owen, what are you saying?" He stood, drawing her to her feet as well, and led her to the window overlooking the ranch. The moon was rising, casting silver light over the buildings, the corrals, the distant pastures. "I'm saying that I love you, Catherine Walsh," Owen said simply, turning to face her. "I love your courage, your intelligence, your kindness. I love the way you've embraced this wild country, despite its hardships. I love the teacher who inspires children and the woman who faces down danger without flinching." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes at his declaration, her heart so full it might burst. "I'm asking you to stay," Owen continued. "Not just for another week or a month, but permanently, as my wife, if you'll have me." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box, opening it to reveal a ring, a simple but beautiful sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds, glinting in the lamplight. "It was my mother's," Owen explained. The only thing of value she owned. She made me promise to give it only to a woman I loved with my whole heart. He took a deep breath. I know this is sudden. I know there are complications, Barton, the ranch, your plans for San Francisco. But I believe, with everything in me, that we could build something beautiful here together. Catherine stared at the ring, at Owen's hopeful, earnest face, at the ranch spread out beyond the window, the ranch that had begun to feel like home in just one short week. If you need time to think, Owen began, but Catherine stopped him by placing her fingers gently against his lips. I don't need time, she whispered. I love you too, Owen Miller. I think I've been falling in love with you since the moment you stopped me from boarding that train. His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Owen gathered her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that spoke of promises and futures and endless possibilities. When they finally parted, Catherine rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. What about Barton? She asked quietly. The threats, Owen's arms tightened around her. We'll face him together. I won't let him destroy what we're building, Catherine. I promise you that. Their moment of happiness was interrupted by the sound of urgent hoofbeats approaching the ranch. Owen tensed, moving Catherine behind him instinctively as he strode to the door. Outside, a rider was dismounting one of the younger cowboys who had been sent into town for supplies. Boss, the young man called, running toward the house. Boss, there's trouble. Owen met him on the porch, Catherine close behind. What is it, Jimmy? Barton's men, Jimmy gasped, out of breath from his hard ride. They're in town, at least a dozen of them. They've taken over the saloon, been drinking heavily, making threats against you, against the ranch. He swallowed hard. They're saying they're coming out here tonight, boss, to burn you out. Owen's expression hardened. Get the men, he ordered. Every hand on the ranch, armed and ready in 10 minutes. As Jimmy ran toward the bunkhouse, Owen turned to Catherine, his eyes troubled. You should hide in the root cellar beneath the cookhouse. It's the safest place on the ranch. Catherine shook her head firmly. I'm staying with you. Catherine, please, you just asked me to be your wife, she reminded him. To share your life, your ranch, your future. That means sharing your troubles too. She straightened her spine. I can shoot, Owen, my father taught me. And I won't cower in a cellar while you and your men defend what's ours. Something shifted in Owen's eyes at her use of ours, pride, love, and a fierce protectiveness. He pulled her close for a brief, hard kiss. God, I love you, he murmured against her lips. But if things get bad, you get to safety. Promise me, Catherine nodded reluctantly. I promise. The next hour was a blur of activity as the ranch prepared for the coming attack. Cowboys positioned themselves strategically around the buildings, rifles and shotguns at the ready. Horses were moved to the furthest pasture for safety. Lanterns were extinguished to make the ranch harder to approach unseen. Catherine found herself in the main house with Owen, Jackson, and Hank, peering through windows into the darkness, listening for any sound of approaching riders. They might not come, Hank said hopefully. Drunk men make big threats they don't always follow through on. Maybe, Owen agreed, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it, but we'll be ready either way. The clock on the mantel ticked away the minutes. 10 o'clock, 11, midnight. The ranch remained quiet, the only sounds the occasional lowing of cattle in the distance and the soft whicker of the few horses left in the stable. Just as Catherine began to hope Hank was right, Jackson tensed beside her. Riders, he said quietly, coming from the east. Owen moved to the window, his expression grim as he peered into the darkness. At least 10 of them, moving slow, trying to approach quietly. He turned to Catherine, his face etched with concern. Last chance to take shelter in the cellar. She shook her head, picking up the shotgun he'd shown her how to load earlier. I'm staying. The pride in his eyes was worth any risk. Owen touched her cheek briefly, then turned to his men. No one fires unless fired upon, he instructed, but if they start something, we finish it. The riders approached slowly, their outlines becoming visible in the moonlight as they neared the ranch yard. Leading them was a large man on a black horse, Richard Barton himself, Catherine realized with surprise. She had expected him to send his hired guns while he remained safely in town. Miller, Barton's voice boomed across the quiet night. Show yourself. Owen straightened his shoulders and stepped out onto the porch, his rifle held loosely but ready. "This is private property, Barton. You and your men need to leave." Barton laughed, a harsh sound in the still night. "Oh, I'll leave, all right. Once I've burned this upstart ranch to the ground and run you out of the territory." "That's not going to happen," Owen replied calmly. "The Circle M is staying right here, and so am I." Behind Barton, his men shifted restlessly, some clearly drunk as Hank had suggested, others more disciplined and dangerous looking. Catherine counted 12 riders total against the 8 ranch hands plus Owen, Jackson, and herself. "You've been a thorn in my side for too long, Miller," Barton growled. "This territory belongs to me. I was here first, built the biggest spread from nothing. And then you came along, stealing my cattle, my water rights, my workers." "I've never stolen anything from you," Owen replied. "Every acre of the Circle M was legally purchased, every head of cattle legitimately acquired, every water right properly filed. Your quarrel isn't with me, Barton, it's with progress, with change. The territory's growing and there's room for more than one successful ranch." Barton spat on the ground. "Pretty words from a man about to lose everything," he gestured to his men. "Burn it all, starting with the house." 2 riders moved forward, torches in hand, but before they could advance further, the crack of a rifle shot split the night. One of the torches exploded in a shower of sparks, the man holding it crying out in surprise rather than pain. "That was a warning," Owen called. "The next shot won't miss." From the shadows around the ranch buildings, Owen's cowboys emerged, rifles raised, creating a defensive perimeter. Barton's men hesitated, suddenly realizing they were surrounded. "You're outnumbered, Miller," Barton snarled, though he sounded less certain. "Maybe," Owen agreed. "But my men are sober, well-positioned, and fighting for their home, are your hired guns that committed to your cause." As if to answer his question, one of Barton's men at the back of the group turned his horse and rode off into the darkness. Then another followed. Barton cursed, wheeling his horse to shout at them, but they were already gone. Catherine watched from the doorway, shotgun ready, as the standoff continued. The tension in the air was palpable, the situation balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong move, one nervous trigger finger, and the night would erupt in violence. Then, unexpectedly, a new sound broke the silence, the rhythm of multiple horses approaching from the direction of town. Everyone turned to see a group of riders entering the ranch yard, led by Sheriff Taylor. Behind him rode at least 15 men, shopkeepers, farmers, and ranchers from Sweetwater Springs. "What's this?" Barton demanded as the sheriff pulled his horse alongside Owen. "Evening, Owen," Sheriff Taylor said, tipping his hat as if they were meeting for a casual social call. "Heard there might be trouble out at the Circle M tonight. Thought you could use some support from your friends in town." "Appreciate it, Sheriff," Owen replied, his eyes never leaving Barton. "Friends?" Barton scoffed. "These people owe me money, they work for me." "No, Richard," said the general store owner, Mr. Peterson, moving his horse forward. "We don't work for you. We've done business with you, yes, but we're not your employees or your subjects. You've squeezed this town long enough," added the blacksmith. "Threatened us, tried to control us." "But Sweetwater Springs isn't yours to command." Barton's face contorted with rage. "I built this territory. Without me, none of you would even be here." "Maybe so," Sheriff Taylor agreed mildly, "but times change. The territory's growing, like Owen said. There's room for cooperation instead of domination." His voice hardened. "Now, you and your men are going to ride back to town, sleep off your liquor, and in the morning we're all going to sit down and work out a reasonable solution to these disputes. And if I refuse," Barton challenged. The sheriff's hand moved to rest on his pistol. "Then I'll arrest you for attempted arson, trespassing, disturbing the peace, and whatever other charges I can think of by sunrise. Your choice." Barton looked around at the forces aligned against him: Owen and his cowboys, the townspeople, the sheriff. Several more of his hired guns had melted away into the darkness, leaving him with only a handful of supporters. "This isn't over, Miller," he finally growled, jerking his horse's head around. "Actually, I think it is," Owen replied steadily. "At least this part of it. Come by the ranch tomorrow, sober, and we'll talk about water rights, grazing boundaries, and how we can coexist in this territory." Barton glared at him for a long moment, then spurred his horse, leading his remaining men away from the ranch at a gallop. As the tension dissolved, Catherine set aside her shotgun and rushed to Owen's side. He wrapped an arm around her waist, drawing her close as the sheriff and townspeople dismounted. "Thank you," Owen said simply, looking at the gathered crowd. "All of you." "Don't thank us yet," Sheriff Taylor replied with a wry smile. "You've still got to negotiate with Barton tomorrow, and he won't be in a friendly mood." "But he'll be reasonable," Mr. Peterson predicted. "Barton's many things, but he's not stupid. He knows when he's lost a battle." As the group moved toward the house, where Catherine insisted on providing coffee and food for their unexpected allies, Owen held her back for a moment, his eyes searching hers in the moonlight. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Catherine smiled, leaning into his embrace. "I'm fine." "Better than fine." She touched the ring on her finger, which caught the moonlight and gleamed. "This is what community looks like, isn't it? People standing together against bullies and threats." Owen nodded, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "This is what home looks like, Catherine. People who care about each other, who fight for each other." He pulled back slightly to meet her gaze. "Still planning to catch that train tomorrow?" Catherine's laugh was soft and full of joy. "I think my plans have changed, Mr. Miller. It seems I have a wedding to plan, a ranch to help run, and a community to build. And a cowboy who loves you more than life itself," Owen added, his voice husky with emotion. "Yes," Catherine agreed, stretching up to kiss him softly. "A cowboy who made me want to stay when I was determined to leave. The most important reason of all." 1 year later, Catherine stood on the porch of the Circle M main house, watching as Owen helped a group of children dismount from their ponies. The spring air was sweet with the scent of wildflowers, and the ranch bustled with activity: cowboys working with cattle, women preparing for the celebration to come, visitors arriving from town. So much had changed in a year. After the confrontation with Barton, a tense but productive negotiation had led to a truce that gradually evolved into a grudging respect between the two ranchers. Barton had eventually recognized that Owen wasn't going anywhere, and that cooperation served both their interests better than conflict. The town of Sweetwater Springs had flourished, with new businesses opening and more families settling in the fertile valley. Catherine had returned to teaching, but now in a proper schoolhouse that Owen had helped build, with large windows, comfortable desks, and a small library stocked with books donated by supportive townspeople. And today, they were celebrating not only their first wedding anniversary, but also the arrival of spring and the news that Wyoming Territory would soon become a state, the first to grant women the right to vote and hold office. "Miss Catherine." Little Sarah Jenkins called, running toward her with a bouquet of wildflowers clutched in her small hand. "I picked these for you, for your anniversary." Catherine knelt to accept the gift, inhaling the sweet fragrance. "They're beautiful, Sarah. Thank you, Mr. Owen says you almost left on a train," the child said, her eyes wide. "Before you got married. Is that true?" "It is," Catherine admitted, smiling as she watched her husband approach, his face lit with the same love that had stopped her from boarding that train a year ago. "I was leaving without looking back." "But why?" Sarah asked, genuinely puzzled. "Didn't you like it here?" Owen reached them, resting his hand on Catherine's shoulder, his touch as reassuring and loving as ever. "She didn't know yet that this was where she belonged," he explained to the little girl. "Sometimes it takes a while to recognize home when you find it." Catherine covered his hand with her own, feeling the matching wedding band on his finger. "Or sometimes," she added softly, "it takes a stubborn cowboy to make you want to stay."